And good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know it's just reached 10:01 for our next installment of our April is Affiliate Month series, the lending and investing. We got Inbanet Fausto here and we got Robert Fragoso. Hello, guys. Thank you for joining us. I am going to allocate about a few more minutes, 5 more minutes to allow people to still log on. I can see them signing on now. The webinar will begin at 10:05. Thank you, everyone.
I'm going to go grab some water for myself, so make sure I got plenty of water here. Back.
And hopefully everyone can see this screen. Once again, I see people pouring in. Thank you for joining us today for our next installment of our April is Affiliate Month. We got Inbanet here, Fausto Navarro and Robert Fragoso here to share some topics with us today. I am still allocating a few more minutes. At 10:05, the webinar will begin. Okay, and fantastic. Once again, finally, thank you everyone for joining us today. We got Fausto Navarro and Robert Fragoso here from Inbanet, gonna go over Hard Money 101 fix and flips. Go ahead and take it away, Fausto, and Robert, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning to everyone. This is Fausto Navarro. I'm with Inbanet, direct hard money lender out of Downey, California. We specialize on first trust deed, second trust deed, and fix and flip. Today, we'll be talking about our fix and flip program. And also we have Robert Fragoso, expert real estate investor in fix and flip.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So, yeah, you want me to just, I'll tell you a little bit about myself here, unless you got something else to add. I've been in the business now for over 30 years. I've been a part of 10,000 plus transactions. A lot of them from the lending side, a lot of them from the fix and flip side. We've been trustee sale buyers. We've built new construction, done a lot of that thing. So hopefully, I'd love for this to be pretty interactive. So if you have questions, I know that there's a question and answer section that hopefully you can take advantage of and get the most out of this session as you possibly can. Speaking on the fix and flip, I've always seen it as a great add-on for agents. I think that agents should approach properties that you're spending all of this money marketing, and if you come across a fixer upper, I think it's a great scenario for you to really add income and to create extra opportunity for yourself. And so taking some of these scenarios when you come across a homeowner, not only is it a way for you to get in the door and possibly make more money by just flipping the house instead of just listing it. If you have your entrepreneur hat on, you can really sit there and look at the opportunity, and really that's the key, I think. I would say that if you're looking at let's say the fixer uppers, and a lot of times what I say by maybe help your other business grow, which is just your regular real estate cycle, is that if you come across a lot of these fixer uppers, oftentimes, what we're seeing right now is a big trend is that, where you approach the homeowner and you help them essentially flip their own house so that they can make more money. And that's something also that Fausto can help you with. And so, becoming their ally is really a key part. Wouldn't you say, Fausto?
Yes, help them leverage, help them fix up the property and help them list. Yes, also in a few minutes, I'm going to be going over the loan programs and the slides that we have.
If you want to go over that now, you're welcome to.
Yes.
And then, that way why don't you do that first, and then I'll incorporate that. Yeah.
Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is one of our 2 programs that we offer for fix and flip. This is our after repair value based program, which means that we can lend money for the rehab of your fix and flip. This one we can do up to 90% of the purchase price and 100% of the rehab. Of course, 90% for experienced investors, starting at 80% of the purchase price, and as you flip more properties, it'll keep getting higher. This one we do require an appraisal. Appraisal time takes from 10 to 14 days to come back. And as soon as we get the appraisal back, we do a final review and we get loan docs out, say within 48 hours, and we fund the very next day. This one, it's a 12-month term, no prepay. This is perfect for people that fix those properties very fast and flip them in less than 3 months. Don't have to worry about prepay. The rate starts at 8.99, and our points is 2.75 points max. So this is our program for most leverage. On our next slide, we have our program. This is our fast closing program. I actually have the record here. Our company, we closed the deal in 41 hours. We had a request of someone that needed to close escrow like yesterday, and other lender could not perform. Deal came in on a Monday evening and we funded on a Wednesday morning. So what this program consists of is up to 80% of the purchase price, no appraisal, no hassle. Like we say, we funds very fast. The rate starts at 8.99. This one is a 12-month term. We do have a prepayment penalty of 3 to 6 months, depending on the type of property, the location, the loan amount. And this one is only 2 points. And again, no appraisal.
I'll add something here for Fausto, just having been in the hard money business in the past, to get a loan done in 41 hours is a tremendous amount of work, even on a hard money side, because the coordination and everything that has to happen. So kudos to Fausto, because I know that was a lot of work.
Yes.
Put forth for his client. So that's great.
Yes, we understand transactions very well. We understand title, escrow, insurance. So my team got everything ready, set up pretty much the next morning. We signed loan documents. Say we got the deal on a Monday. We worked title and escrow Tuesday morning. We signed loan documents in the afternoon, and Wednesday morning we funded. So yes, keep us in mind for these type of programs. Also here are social medias, give us a like, give us a follow, and any questions you may ask me at the end or send a message in the Q&A. So now I'm giving it away to Robert. Robert, you may continue.
All right. So, I think that I'm going to start off with just one of the questions that is in the question and answer here from Vilma. And her question is, what rate in return in today's market should one be looking at? And so she's asking essentially what type of return and what type of spread that you need to have in order to make these deals. feasible for you to fix and flip. So there's a couple different ways to answer that. And I think the first thing is that, one is it depends on the amount of opportunity that you come across. If you have what I call good deal flow, where you have a lot of properties that come your way and you have an opportunity to buy multiple properties and you're picking and choosing the ones that you want, then in that case, you want your profit margin to be a little bit higher. So there's a couple different ways to look at it, depending on whether you're paying all cash or you're financing it. Let's go into the assumption that you're using a hard money loan and you're calling Fausto up and saying, hey, I've got to buy this and I'm going to take the most amount of leverage, right? And so in that scenario, if you're borrowing, let's say 90% of the purchase price, he's giving you all of the money for the rehab, and you're going up to, let's say, 70% of the ARV. So that what that means is that anything above 70% that doesn't fit there, right? That's going to be your down payment and your commitment or your investment into the property. So assuming you have enough money to do that and carry payments and do all of that, then in that scenario, I would think that your spread in today's market, you probably want it to be at least what I would call an 8% net profit, basically net to sales. So it's net to the after repaired value. So if it's going to sell for, let's say, $1 million, then you want to necessarily net probably a minimum of, let's say, 80 after all of your expenses, after paying the hard money, the monthly payments, the rehab, your selling commission, everything else. And so, because otherwise, just think about this from this perspective. If, let's say, you end up having, in that scenario, I'm just going to use a round number, let's say $100,000 into the deal, and you're making 80, that's a very good return, because you're probably going to be out of that deal. And in this market today, while most people, they account for, let's say, 6 months, really you can get out of them in about 4 to 4.5 months, so long as your repairs are being done well. And we'll talk about the repairs here in a little bit, but so I would say that 8% versus your after repaired value is a good solid number to work off. Generally speaking, when I'm doing deals right now, I'm looking for deals that are between 8 and 10% or higher, if we're going to be in and out of it in 6 months. Now, I say that because I'm looking for the yield and what you're going to make, right? So the other way to look at it is that, let's say if you're paying cash, then really you're looking for about somewhere in that 30, 35% annualized return. And so if you're in and out of it in, let's say, 4 months, then you need to make about 12% on your money during that 4-month period in order to make it to end up with 36%, right? So, or 10% if you're just looking at 30%. And the reason I say that is this, is that there's a lot of work and it's a lot of time that goes into these fix and flips. As a real estate agent, you should be looking at the opportunities, but also figuring out if it's worth your time, because it is going to take some of your time away from your normal, let's say, prospecting and your normal routine. So you could conceivably, unless you have enough systems in place, you could conceivably see that your, let's say, listing business, right, we'll consider that a different business, could slow down a little bit. And so, because you're spending more time on this. So ideally, I think that the best thing to do with these is to have a team in place so that you can oversee the team, right? Have the expectation with whoever's doing your repairs, have that those conversations, and make sure that up front, really, you're accounting for all of the things that you're going to do to the property, and most importantly, that you stick to that plan. One of the, I'll say the largest mistakes that was the most common that I would see people make repeatedly is that they would sit there and they would go into a rehab and they'd say, hey, I'm going to spend $40,000 here. And then when they're in it, either they didn't plan enough up front, so 40,000 turns into 60,000. And, so their $40,000 profit at the end turns into, 20,000. And then they spend all of this time doing it. And instead of taking, 2 months, or let's say 6 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever the length of the rehab was going to be, it takes twice as long because they didn't budget enough money and they're waiting for cash flow and so forth. So I would say to try to stay away from those pitfalls. And the way to do that is to make sure that you're really walking through and itemizing as much as you can so that you're protected from that side, especially when you're dealing with contractors. it's a lot of, so I used to be a licensed contractor. I let my license expire in 2001 because really I didn't do any third-party jobs. But I will tell you, just in dealing with a lot of the contractors, it's very common for them to give you whatever price that you want them, that basically that you may want to hear so that they get started with the job. And then when you're in it, they'll say, well, that's not included in my job. And there's all these change orders and things that start to change, or cost extra, or perhaps you're thinking in your house, man, I'm going to make this house beautiful. And the contractor is thinking like, I'm going to paint it, put some flooring, change the kitchen, and that's it. And then, but what about the doorknobs, the door hinges, the molding on the base molding, are you putting new windows? Is there a roof? Is there landscaping? And if you're going to landscape it, is there automatic sprinklers? All these things start to add up very, very quickly. Is there a fence? Are you painting the fence? Right? Because a lot of contractors, they'll give you a bid to paint the house, and your assumption is, hey, they're going to paint all this other stuff too. And then, you get it done, and they're like, okay, we're done. And you're like, well, what about this? And it's like, well, that's not included. It's not in my bid. So it's important to basically line item everything, and then have an internal cost that you think it might be. And so if the contractor, usually they're going to be probably, pretty close, if not slightly less or slightly above, doesn't really matter. You just want to have your internal expectation as to what that should cost. And most importantly, set those parameters with your contractor as to all of the details. I don't know if I can share my screen. I would share kind of what, you know what? In fact, let me open this up and I'll show you one that I'm working on right now. And you'll get a good feel for just how detailed it becomes, and what I think that you should do in order to really be specific and have a good understanding, so you don't get into some problems. Let me see. I'll open this up here. That's the beauty. I love doing these things live, but I will say that doing them virtually makes it very easy to screen share and do all that stuff. So there's definitely a plus from that standpoint. Let's see here. All right, we'll pick this one here. Bear with me 1 second and you'll get a feel for, let's see, share. Hang on 1 second. That is the wrong one. Well, while we're waiting for this to pop up here, if you guys are coming across any fix and flips, I know I've started to mention this a little bit, and if you have a homeowner that needs repairs, I know that Fausto is also able to, and can you guys see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. All right, so this is a house that's kind of a basic rehab, and you'll see up here, I kind of went through the numbers and looked at, okay, if we do light repairs versus, very light, and basically did different versions of what we were thinking of to do the remodel. And the first one, I'll just start with the full rehab. And so the full rehab, there's a little bit of padding, but one of the things that I go through is I just go through essentially all of the rough, which is all of the, let's say, things that would be behind the wall first. And I structure this sheet ends up being what we call a go-by. So whichever the remodel ends up being that we end up going with, we give this to the contractor so they have an expectation. And if they're good, they also give it to their employees so that their employees have an understanding as to exactly what needs to happen for each remodel. So when you're walking through, the purpose of remodeling is to get to that end, whatever your after repaired value is that you're going for, is to make sure you hit that number. In order to hit that number, in many cases, you have to have a certain type of finish to the property. So in this case, it's a mid-century modern house. And, if we're looking through it, this is all the rough stuff, for the plumbing. We're going to take a half bath, relocate the, what was the kind of pantry that was next to the kitchen and make that half bath now a full bath. So it ends up as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's about 1,200 square feet. This particular property is in Fullerton. And so we go through and you see we're kind of accounting for all of the little things, and if I scroll over, I have this set up right now is just a labor only bid. So I asked the contractors, I don't want them to include all of the material. I only want them to include their labor. And the reason is that gives me a better understanding as to what the cost of the materials are, but also that it eliminates them marking up the material. So many contractors, what happens is if they're going to, let's say, Home Depot or whatever their supplier is, and they're buying something for less, they're marking it up for their handling of that. So my requirement is that they're still going to have to go and pick the stuff up, but we're going to pay for it, right? And then we kind of teach the contractors a little bit about how to be more efficient so they don't go to the store every day or every other day and waste all that time, because that slows down your project. And if you're, have financing on this project, time is money. And so really what you're trying to do is lessen the time. And so there's a couple different ways to do that. And so once you have this labor only bid completed, and you'll see when we're scrolling down, it just goes through whatever they're drywalling and so forth, but then it goes into like the rooms. And so at this point, the assumption is all of the rough stuff is mostly done. And now we're getting to the finishes. And so usually, like I haven't dropped in the door here yet, but this is the hardware we would use. In this case, because it's mid-century modern, you can't drop in recessed lights. And so we're dropping in track lighting. And so this is the track lights. This is the dining room fixture. The bedroom only has one light fixture right now, which is a wall sconce. And so we just basically account for everything. We're keeping the doors, but we're switching the hinges, new stoppers, new door handles, and those things. And so as you go through, this gives you a feel for what your house is going to look like when it's done, but also it's telling the contractor exactly what you want. Like in our bathroom, the back wall is going to have an accent tile, which is more expensive. And then the 2 side walls will use subway tile because it's less expensive. And so this basically becomes the go-by for the contractor to sit there and say, okay, in this room, here's what needs to happen. And the best thing is, if you do it this way, a lot of contractors, what they do is they do something called front loading, which means that they ask for more of the draw up front. So if you have a labor only bid and you break it down and they sign off on this, then when they're done with installing the chandelier, or they're done with, let's say, the tile work that they've done, then that's the draw amount that they're entitled to, instead of just saying, hey, I need you to send me $5,000 or $10,000. You can just add up everything as it goes through, so that it makes it very easy for them to see their progress. And it's much easier for you to see your progress. And if you have draws from a lender, your lenders will love it, because basically what happens is that, that they know that you're on top of it, and they know exactly what percentage you are, versus leaving it as ambiguous as, hey, we're 25% done or 30% done or whatever it is. And so I have found that going through this, now, when I walked through this house, I thought, hey, I could do all of this for about $85,000. And so I'm going to scroll down at the bottom here. And so my material only is going to be basically $52,000, right? So it's $48,000 plus the tax. So $53,000 here. And so so that means that I have to get the labor done all in for essentially $40,000, right? Or less, about $35,000, which is probably not likely. I'm most likely going to spend most like $50,000. So I'm going to be closer to 100,000 instead of my 85,000. Now, one of the things I have included in here is a roof, and I don't think we're going to need a roof, so that might save us 8,500. So, it's a little bit more than what we anticipated going in. But there's things that, if you're trying to stay on budget, that I can cut out. Like, for instance, in this one, I have music in the backyard. I'm dropping in kind of an electric movie screen. So there's things that I can cut out to just say, hey, let me get the cost down to my budgeted $85,000. And so if you go to, let's say, the very light version, which is basically cleaning up the house, because, the other side is, okay, maybe I sell it for less, but, we can do a lot less. So I'm out quicker, and maybe you make a little bit less money, but the market is so hot that maybe they're going to pay more anyhow. And so the light version I think when we came out with the light version, we were at 68,000, and this was the labor bid. So in this case, right now we're at 23,000, and they had already filled out the labor for it. So they're 42,000. So we're going to be 68,000 all in instead of 95 or 100,000. And so you're really, what you're trying to do is analyze these transactions so that you can see, I guess and I'll stop sharing that unless you guys have some questions for it. We can go back, but essentially what you're trying to do is make sure that you account for as much as possible so that you don't go over budget significantly. Most of the times you're going to be within a range, if you're doing this right, of about 10% of your original estimate. In some cases, you could be a little bit less. I'm probably running somewhere in that 5% range right now, and which is pretty good given that our material cost continues to increase. And that's the other thing, is that when you order when you first start doing these remodels, I think an important thing for you to do would be to start ordering materials, because there's a lag right now. I don't know if you guys have been to Long Beach recently or in that area. There's a backup of these shipping containers, and these shipping these tanker, or I guess shipping, what would you call them? I guess ships. And they're really backed up. I mean, about a month ago, they were backed up all the way to Newport, because there's so many of them that have, because of COVID, they weren't able to get unloaded, and the backup slowly started to get worse and worse and worse. And so a lot of, like, I'll give you an example. I've been working with a cabinet company for years that I've purchased most of my cabinets from. And I have a project that I'm remodeling right now, and we were ready to order the kitchen. And they said, hey, we're backed up about 6 weeks. And I'm like, okay, well, before I would order the day before, and our guys would pick them up the next day. And I'm like, well, crap, I don't want to wait 6 weeks. So I found another vendor who had them in stock. And so we just started buying. After that happened, we started just buying as much as we could up front, so that we have as much material there to, so that the project doesn't slow. But being in tune with your contractor, your vendors, all of that is, I think, a very, very key part here. The from a perspective of time, one of the things that is very important that I do is, and this is kind of, keep in mind that contractors, for a lot of, I guess for most of them, they kind of enter the business not as like, hey, I went to college to be a contractor. If they did that, they're probably not going to work on your rehab. It's more like they're getting into like the commercial building, high rises or larger buildings, things along those lines. Most of the general residential contractors kind of fell into it. They either worked the construction trade, then eventually got their license and started doing work, or they've been a worker and they put a crew together, and whether they're licensed or not, they kind of fall into it. So handling business from a business perspective and efficiency isn't necessarily their best thing right now. I will say that oftentimes, you should ask them, who do you get your flooring from? Who do you get your plumbing from? Because many times, because most of their bids include all of the material, they know where to go to get like the cheapest of the cheap and save money. And so they might help you out. I still ask that question all the time, because we think we have great vendors that we work with to save money on all of the materials, but every so often someone comes up with something that's less. I'll give you a prime example. We just had that. We were building a deck, and we were going to our lumber supplier, and the lumber had gone through the roof. The guy that was building the deck, he said, I have a place in Ventura, which is far. This project was in LA, and he said, I have a place in Ventura that is about half the price though. And basically what had happened is they hadn't adjusted their pricing yet. And, he's a guy that builds decks, so he knew exactly where to go for the place. And I said, well, how much is it to get it delivered? He said he would do it for $150. Okay, great. So we saved almost $1,000 in lumber, and spent $150 for him to go pick it up. But it saved us, essentially $850 on just that one part. So it's kind of important to keep in touch with your and work like a team so that you can save money, and hopefully at the end of the day that translates to more profit. So going into assessing your your remodels, and goes back to Vilma's question. I'll share another screen here. And everyone kind of looks at things a little bit differently, but I'll do a simple, I think I have a simple version here. Let's see here. All right. I'll share this screen here, and this will help you analyze what a good deal is versus not. Let's see here. All right. So you guys should be able to see the screen now. And so you can do this yourself. This is just a spreadsheet I've used through the years. This is, it's kind of essentially what it is a HUD-1. And I put in here I'll put the costs of the all right. And so this is basically hard money financing. If you're in and out of a project in, let's say, 4 months, basically you'll just go through and I'll walk you through some of the things that you should be looking at when you're purchasing it. Is what is, the amount that you're borrowing. If you're borrowing, let's say in this case here, I think I've got it set up for, let's see here, we'll do 80%. And where is this? 21. And so if you're borrowing, let's say 80% of the purchase price plus 100% of the remodel, if we're going through, Vilma, I don't know if you're still online, if you want to give me an exact scenario, I'll run the numbers on that. Or if someone has, a deal perhaps that they came across or that they're doing or that they're looking at, we'll run it through here and see if the numbers are. But as someone mentions that, if not, I'll use one of my examples. This is basically set up to mirror kind of a HUD-1, but include the hard money costs if you're financing it. And also all of your closing costs up front, your remodeling costs, and then come up with, how much money you might need for the project. The other side is, let's see.
Robert, I have a few numbers that we can run by. Let me know.
Sure.
When you're ready.
Okay, hang on. So let me input those then.
Yeah, and this is from a live scenario that we have right now. We should be funding tomorrow, this scenario. I'll just say the city and the numbers, but not the address, of course.
Okay, so give me the purchase price.
Purchase price is $315. This is a small flip, yes.
Okay, and then the remodel?
$20,000.
Okay, and what's the after repaired value?
$445. And we have an appraisal for this. It's been confirmed.
Okay, and so so $20,000, they're going to get in and out of that probably in 3 months because that's a really light remodel, right? You're going to get, you're going to basically have, it doesn't take much to spend $20,000. They're probably replacing the kitchen, painting inside and out, maybe doing flooring is about it.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, it's. I don't think they're doing much to the bathrooms. Maybe a vanity or light, but with $20,000, you're not going to spend. The house number one is probably in pretty good condition. Okay, so this is if they can get the repairs done, and hopefully they're going through a spreadsheet kind of like mine where you analyze everything and that the 20 is a real 20, right? Number two is that so this basically says on this particular deal, if they're in and out in 3 months and they're spending the hard money, you've got. They're going to need about, here, we'll go back to that. I'll go back to the other screen. But it looks like their profit here is about 15%, which is a great deal, right? They've got about $70,000 in profit, and that's after paying a 2.5% commission to a buyer's agent. So assuming that they're going to list it themselves, or even if they're going to list it with an agent, I would assume most of the agents here are going to just list it themselves and just have to pay a buyer's commission if they don't find a buyer on their own. And so right now, $70,000 on a $400,000 house or $450,000 house, that's a home run deal. That's a really great deal. And that's a good buy. So to walk you through how those numbers work, so here's their $315 purchase price, right? They're paying, let's say 9.5% and 2 points. So Inbanet is likely doing if this is a 90% program and they're financing 80%, right? They're likely financing 272. Is that the right number?
On this one, I'm doing 90% of the purchase price and the 20,000.
All right, so let's
of 303.
so 303,500.
Yes, correct.
Okay, and then and so I'm going to delete the second one here, and that so you can really see. So they're coming in with about, if they're making 3 months payments, so this includes 3 months payments, they would need about $52,000 basically to do that deal. So if you think about it for a second, they're going to put out $52,000, and then they make about $72,000. That's a home run deal. That's really great. And so kudos to that investor. He got a really good buy. That's a good deal. So but let's say, what do you do if, let's say, you found this deal, but you don't have that $52,000? So in that type of scenario, I mean, really what I would say is reach out to Fausto. I'm an investor with them as well with regards to something like this, as I can be a gap lender. And I know Fausto is happy to kind of do all that. They can handle the first, and then I would come in with the $52,000, and then we would split this profit. And so we basically partner on the deal, or we can work out some sort of return or something along those lines. But at this case, rather than just pass on the deal, I would think you would do this deal. This deal is a home run deal. This is a really good deal. Any other examples that you want to go through?
Not at the moment, but I do have a few questions that you want. I would like you to answer for
Sure.
the attendees. Where do you see the market heading this year? How things are with the fix and flip?
So I was one of the guys that when COVID first started, thought that the market was going to really do okay. That overall it wouldn't necessarily drop, and if it dropped, it was going to be temporary. And so I think that right now, the markets, a lot of people, they kind of start getting really nervous because they think it's a bubble, and really what you're seeing is not necessarily a bubble, but what you're seeing is pent up demand from a year of basically nothing happening, right? So if you look back during quarantine and you go back and look at the reports, what you would have seen was that new mortgage applications, right? So people that were trying to buy a house or trying to get qualified to buy a house skyrocketed during quarantine. And I mean, they were going up 30%, 50% year over year. But yet no one was really selling their houses because they were quarantined. And so they didn't really want people walking through. No one really knew how COVID kind of worked. It was, I mean, if you remember back to like March of last year, I mean, I remember going to the gas station and being nervous. I had my gloves on, I had a mask on, I had all this stuff. I'm like, crap, I'm going to get it. And you're touching stuff, you're taking off the stuff. And it's like, all right, that's not necessarily how it works now. Now we understand, you have a better understanding. You also have a better comfort level. And, I remember going through, I sold an apartment building and the tenants didn't want us to come through. And the buyer shows up, and I swear, the buyer is in head to toe. Like, I mean, you saw the quarantine suits for like when they were showing the videos in China, they're in these like head to toe. It looks like a bee suit. I mean, he got out of his car and we're like, holy crap, like maybe we shouldn't be here. And the guy's like, just great. But anyway, but he walks through, and of course that got the tenant really comfortable, but it worked for him. And I was like, well, maybe I need more than a mask. But anyhow, at the end of the day, what happened was inventory really got reduced, right? And it got compressed. And with that compression, what happens is that would-be sellers are also many times also buyers. And so if they can't buy and they're seeing this frenzy, but they're already comfortable, a lot of times they just want to wait. And so it kind of slows down on the sellers. So it's a little bit more difficult, for those sellers that need to buy in the same area or in, let's say still California, to sit and look at this and say, okay, if I sell now, what am I going to do with the money? And I think that's a key part in that, if you're sitting there and you're looking at, your marketplace and you look at it today, and the reason there's a frenzy is you had month over month with double-digit year over year increases in new mortgage applications, which meant that or purchase mortgage applications, I'm sorry. And then you have all these people that were refinancing. So there's a lot of money that's in the marketplace. You have all of the entitlements that the government gave people for COVID, and and that put a lot of money out in the marketplace. And so, because of that, what happens is that you've got this pent up demand right now that's we're working through, and so it's being worked through in a lot of different facets. I hear people all the time talk about inflation and, hey, oh, we're having crazy inflation. It's not really inflation. If you back out the pent up demand, we're kind of on par. A lot of it is going to correct. A lot of it is not. I'm sure you guys have heard lumber prices have gone through the roof. There's other reasons than inflation why they've gone through the roof. And if you're sitting there and you look at the big picture, don't buy into all of the hype, and the bubble. The people who cry, hey, we're in a real estate bubble, they've been crying, we're in a real estate bubble since like 2015, right? I mean, they've been wrong already for 6 years plus, in some cases, 10 years or more. And we're not in a bubble. So I think you have to look at the big picture and not just one sector. And the big picture is from a demographic standpoint, if you remember the last downturn, everyone kind of made fun of the millennials that they were still living at home, living in the mom's basement. Well, now it's 10 years later or 12 years later, they've got great jobs, they're forming households, they're making great money. And because of the millennials, the millennials outnumber the baby boomers. So your silent generation was the older, like those are the people that are now like in their 80s and 90s. Most of them have already sold their houses. If they haven't, those people are generally, those properties are going to be inherited unless there's a financial need. And so removing the distressed cases out of it, most of those will get inherited into the baby boomer generation. And so when you look at the baby boomers right now that are all retiring, the ones that are selling, okay, they're selling and that's okay. But the amount of millennials and the largest sector hasn't even really hit the market just yet, but the millennials right now, the older millennials are hitting their 40s. And in your 40s, there's something that just happens naturally. You start to date, and they did this a little later, which is what everyone was making fun of them 10 or 12 years ago, is that usually with previous generations, you date in your 20s, you marry in your 30s, and then you're forming households in your 30s. With the millennials, they waited a little bit. And I think part of it was probably that they saw many of their parents lose their homes, right? And so you had multiple income homes for a while, and then they got stabilized, as things do. And that's the natural progression. And so now the millennial base is bigger than the baby boomers, which is a large section of the sellers that are out there today. And because of that, the demand is great. And so you got a huge demand, and that is really going to be the way for, I would say, the next, if I just from a strictly speaking about demographics, I would say at least 2024. And if you look at interest rates are at an all-time low. So because interest rates have dropped, and if you really look at the big picture, instead of just looking at the sales price, if you look at the sales prices before with the higher interest rates versus what they are now, yes, prices have increased, but the affordability has also, kind of, I would say, decreased in that, you have more buyers than sellers. And anytime you have that type of recipe, you're going to have this kind of the market that we have now. Now, listen, normally healthy appreciation every year is going to be somewhere around 2%, 3%. That's healthy. Having 10% plus is really unhealthy. Even 4% is not great. So while most people don't want to see a rise in interest rates, the reality is that the market probably needs a little bit of a rise in interest rates in order to cool it down a little bit, and so that you don't have this frenzy. And so once you have this, you'll have a more balanced market. And at that point, now you can sit there and say, okay, once it gets more balanced, you'll have more sellers that enter the market, and then you'll creep up from, Jesus, if you pull up the MLS right now, you're probably going to see the days on the market, and everything's like, 0, 6, 10, 12. If your house is on the market for more than like 15 or 20 days, you're either priced too high or you're negotiating with so many offers that it's just taking that time. and I'm sure everyone has gone through the scenarios already where, if you're representing buyers, they've been outbid. I had a friend just recently, he made an offer on a house, and he was, let's see, he went about 100,000, well, when he went 100,000 over asking, non-contingent, all cash, and was still bid out. And get this, they didn't even reply to his offer. They didn't even counter. And he's like, what the hell just happened? Now I see that, most of the properties that I get, from like real estate agents, they call me directly and they say, hey, I've got this deal. Do you want to partner on it? Or do you want to, or give me some advice on it or whatever it is. I'm sure Fausto gets these calls all the time too. It's like, hey, I've got this deal and, can you finance it? And what's the numbers? And so, we're blessed in that, a lot of these properties are off market, and I think that's really the name of the game right now, because competing with everyone on the MLS is very, very difficult. And the reality is there's plenty of sellers that they just don't want their property on the market for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes they're embarrassed by the condition. Other times they have a need for cash quickly. There's times where I've bought a property, I've looked at it and I'm like, you can just sell it for more on the MLS. It's not in terrible shape. And they give me a reasonable reason as to why they don't want to do that. And so, sometimes money isn't the most important thing, especially to some people who've either inherited the home. Speaking of like probates or trust sales, that's probably one of the most common things that I'm getting recently. So if you're out there marketing and you're looking for these type of deals, that's a great place to market. I'm getting a lot of these sellers who, they've inherited the home. And one of the reasons that they don't want to put it on, believe it or not, is that it's their parents' home and they don't want their neighbors to see how their parents were living because they have deferred maintenance. And the outside of these houses, sometimes they look great and they maintain the outside, but the inside is really like trash. It's not great because maybe one of the spouses passed away first, and then, either depression sets in or, just think about it. If you've got older kids, they start to have their own life. And so, a lot of these people that are elderly, sometimes they're left on their own and they get, visit occasionally, or they go over to their kid's house instead of them coming there because the house smells old or whatever. And these are plenty of reasons why heirs don't necessarily want, the house on the market. Other times when you're approaching them is you can approach them that you can fix up the house. And so, you can reach out to Fausto and they'll put out the money for that seller to be able to fix up the house, and then that'll help you get more listings. So from an aspect of fix and flip, I think that you have to look at the business very broadly and how it could be used as a tool for your listing side as well, right? And so part of that is looking at everything as an opportunity versus having tunnel vision and saying, hey, I'm doing all of this marketing just to get listings, right? Because what happens is that you miss out on a lot of these other opportunities. And I think hopefully the key takeaway here, to be able to understand that the opportunity is out there. And I will say, a lot of people, they ask me, I get this often also, is one of the questions is, God, you can't get these anymore. There's no more deals. And the reality is there's lenders like Inbanet, there's a ton of hard money lenders, and they're all busy right now. And the reason they're busy is because there's a ton of business out there, and there are a lot of opportunities out there. If you're not finding them, you're probably looking in the wrong spot.
Robert, with that being said, do you have any comments that you can share on wholesalers and their strategies?
Sure. So, the wholesalers aren't going to like this. Most wholesalers is kind of a soft con, in my opinion, right? Because what they're doing is they type a property for, that they have kind of no intention on being able to close. And sometimes they don't have the ability to close. And there's some good wholesalers out there that are legitimate and they want to sell good deals. But most of them, what they do is they deflate the cost of repairs and then they inflate the actual after repaired value. And they're trying to make a spread, right? And so as an agent, I would think that, you're probably trying to stay away from the wholesalers because then, there's a higher likelihood that if they can't find an investor to actually buy it, that your property is going to fall out of escrow and potentially you could lose that listing. The other side of the coin is that, I don't mind. Listen, with that said, I've worked with plenty of wholesalers. I think the most I've paid as a wholesale fee was either $240,000 or $250,000. And so if you think about this wholesaler, right, they got a home run deal. I mean, it was a grand slam deal, actually. It was a really great deal. And, you know, the seller, it was an inherited situation. She had tracked down the heir who didn't know he was an heir, didn't know that he was even a family member of this person, and helped them go through. They didn't have the money to go through probate. She put it all up and basically offered to buy the estate ahead of time. So she bought him out and then took it through probate, and we bought it from her. And so, you know, it was because it took such a long time. The reason that the deal was even better for us is it took her about, I don't know, almost 9 months to go through that process. And, you know, we got a good deal. She got a very good deal. And, you know, so people that ask me all the time, it's like, well, you know, how much, like I always ask for transparency because I like to know where everything falls. I don't necessarily care how much wholesalers are making. If they make 2,000 or 250,000, as long as it's a good deal for me, it's a good deal for me. And that's fine. But with that said, there's plenty of wholesalers that are trying to make 40,000 to sell you a deal that you're going to make 7,000 on. You know, and in that scenario, you know, I think that's imbalanced. If you're taking all of the risk, you know, and mostly they're probably pitching the deal with higher numbers and so forth, or the repair numbers that's lower. And so I think that you know, you just want to basically be double check and make sure everything is right. I'll tell you what I tell my team is that when you're fixing and flipping, everyone's your enemy. You know, everybody makes money from your transaction, whether you make money or not. And so that's the contractor, that's, you know, other real estate agents, that is, you know, lenders, no offense, Fausto, but, you know, but you look at everybody basically is going to make money from that transaction. So you have to look and sit there and not take everything for granted, you know. So when let's say wholesaler or real estate agent that's trying to sell you that house is telling you, yeah, you could fix this up for $20,000 or $50,000, do your own numbers and know what that number is actually going to be. If they tell you, hey, it's going to sell for 500,000, drive the comps. If you don't know the area, reach out to other real estate agents who know the area. A lot of them might know that house already and tell you that house will never sell for that because of this. Or, oh yeah, that one, did you know that there was an, you know, sewage leak or whatever? Oh, that house is on here. I had one that I almost bought and I would have sworn it was on septic or on sewer. And for some reason, this entire block was the only block in the entire neighborhood that was on septic tanks, and would never sell for the value. It would always sell for like $30,000 or $50,000 less than the next block over that was connected to a sewer, because the buyers in that area didn't really want septic tanks. And so, you know, when I'm looking at my after repaired value, if now you cut that by 50,000, well, that was more than half of the profit that we were estimating. And so really reaching out to the people that are experts in the neighborhood is, I would say, very key and very important. But treat everyone as, you know, kind of, you know, politely and so forth. But, you know, you basically, everyone's your enemy until you're done. Other questions you had?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, what do you look into? What do you look into as far as a 500K flip and a $1.5 million flip to see what are potential hazards? Like, what would make you want to do this deal or not want to make a deal?
All right. So the key part of, let's say, a $1.5 million, let's say $1.5 million flip versus a $500,000 flip is going to be two things. Many times it's just the location, right? The other thing is going to be the quality of the finishes that you put into it and the quality of the construction that you have to do. And so if you're doing a $500,000 home in a bread and butter kind of blue collar neighborhood, you know, yeah, you still want to do a quality remodel, but at the same time, they might not be as finicky of a buyer as the buyer in the $1.5 million price point. Now, be very careful if, like, I don't mind doing the $1.5 million versus a 500. Both of them are fine. But if you're doing a $1.5 million property in an area that is mostly, let's say, $800,000 properties, we call king of the hill. And so you don't necessarily want to be king of the hill because your buyer pool is much smaller. So if you're doing a $1.5 million property, then that 1.5 property should be in an area that is mostly 1.5 or higher type properties. So ideally, because that's where you're going to get the largest section of the buyer pool from that particular area. And so I think it's important to sit there and see. So from a construction side or a remodeling side, the market's really hot right now. So it's almost the same, if you're in, let's say, the mid-tier 1.5 area versus a $500,000 area. There's a lot of buyers that are looking, they're really competing, and you only can sell it to one person. So as long as you do enough repairs to meet the demand for that after repaired value, then I would say that is that's a key part. But other than that, I will say that the quality for certain things has to be there. Perhaps instead of in a $1.5 million property, you're not dropping in a Kenmore stove, you're probably dropping in a, DCS or, Viking or something along those lines. So, your cost is going to be a little bit higher. One of the key differences that I would say is that, instead of doing a sliding door, in let's say the $500,000 properties, we're dropping in bifold exterior doors. And so each one of those doors ranges from $4,000 to $15,000, depending on the size of the wall. And that's just for the door. And so, but that's a really trendy thing. So you also have to look at the area and look at your comparables, right? So if your comparables all have, these La Cantina doors that open up the wall and yours doesn't, don't expect to get that value, right? And so that's a key thing. And in certain areas, buyers are looking for certain things. Like in Laguna Beach, it's not just a bifold door; they look for a certain brand, and it's because that brand is easier to open than the other ones, and the buyers know that. And if you look in like like San Clemente in that area, there's what's common in these rehabs is what's called a flip out window, and so it's basically a window that you hit, and the entire window opens out, so it feels completely open because they want the ocean breeze. And there's a company that manufactures those that was created in San Clemente. And so all the buyers, they look for flip out windows, because that's a key thing. So they're willing to pay more. Each one of those windows is $2,000 to $4,000, and so, but they're looking for that. So they want the ocean facing ones to have that. And so, so that's part of the cost. So just be cognizant as to what your competition is doing to the house and really look at it and itemize it out so you make sure that you do the same things or something similar. But there's a lot of times where we cheat. There's things that we're like, okay, well, this guy has all of this stuff. If we do these other things that cost less, is it an offset? And most of the times we're right, sometimes we're not, but most of the times we're right, and then we try to save the money.
Okay, thank you for that, Robert. Let me see what questions we have in the Q&A. One second. A few attendees are asking, what's the software that you use for your rehab breakdown? The one that you have the light breakdown and the more.
So I'm using Numbers, which is essentially kind of an Excel. You can do it on like Google Sheets or something along those lines. I keep it pretty simple. You can create your own on like a master sheet and then just cut and paste, which is kind of what I do. In my old company that I sold my shares of, we had a software that kind of did everything. I kept this really simple. I'm getting ready to build a technology for as I'm starting to do more and more. Really, I took a lot of time off, and now I'm kind of getting back into it. And so I'm developing an internal kind of software. But it's really just if you go through a house and you just itemize everything from a room, you'll notice that you're doing the same things over and over again on these remodels, and just create a master sheet for yourself and with links and the pictures. And so you know what it is. I have it done with a few different looks. We have like mid-century modern, we have a standard contemporary, we have a Spanish one, and so those similar looks go the same way. Most of the finishes work for whether it's some of the lower price points, you have to dumb down some of the costs because you can't spend, $400 on a chandelier, but there's plenty of really nice $150 chandeliers that you can get away with. Some of the trim, we put is a little bit more intricate, and you can cut that down as well. And on some of the, so these are really the differences, I would say, in some of the finishes, but the work product is kind of the same. You know, it's so this is one of the reasons I'm not a real fan of like doing the like San Bernardino marketplace, because yeah, you can make $40,000-$50,000 over there. But you know, you can probably make 70 or 100,000 just working in a slightly higher price point for the same amount of work product, and not have to drive 2 hours unless you're already out in that area.
Okay. Another question. What is your experience with the fix and flips that involve ADU? What is the time frame to get the permit? Do you recommend it? What do you think?
So I am not a huge fan of ADs. I've done them. We've done some where we've got them approved and then never built it and just sold it as ADU ready. And the reason is this, is one of the problems is that there's no standardized method for the appraisal. And so what happens is that you may sit there and look at like, well, now I've got this much more square footage, but if you get the wrong appraiser, they don't give you full value on that ADU. And so unless you're in an area that has comparables of single families with ADUs, and those comparables are selling higher. So if you look at like the Jefferson Park area, you know, the kind of the 10 freeway in that area, you look at, let's say, Eagle Rock, Highland Park, Silver Lake, a lot of Hollywood, a lot of these areas that have ADUs and they've been selling, and you have other comparables with ADUs, that's great. But if you look at an area like, let's say, Whittier or Downey, where there's not a lot of ADUs, you know, that have sold, then your value is not going to be much greater than the cost to do the ADU. So a lot of people say, it's like, wow, I can just convert this garage, that's going to be $20,000. It's not really, that's not really how it works. To go through an ADU, there's a lot of things that you have to look at. One of them, if you're considering doing an ADU, when you first buy it, ask the title company for plotted easements. This is probably the biggest pitfall that most people don't do. And so if you have a plotted easement, right, and let's say there's a utility company and you're going to add on or build a new ADU, or you're going to take the garage and add to the garage, and you're going to add within that easement area, then your utility company has to also sign off on it. Otherwise, they won't connect the power to you. And so in like the city of LA, it's conceivable that the city approves it and then the utility company won't connect to it. And so then you're stuck with a fight, or you have to relocate their lines to essentially eliminate that easement. So there's certain things that, you know, you should look for. But the biggest one by far is, I would say, that you look at apples and apples. You know, I get pitched routinely. We've got a duplex here. We're going to add a third unit as an ADU. And now we've got 3 units. We've got 4 units and we're going to add an ADU and a junior ADU. And then now it's 6 units, and it's not 6 units. It's still 4 units with 2 accessory buildings, right? And so if you remember, like before the ADUs, a guest house wasn't considered square footage. It's considered an amenity. And so right now, because there's not clear language for the appraisers, that kind of makes it systematic for all of them to have to follow. Some of them, they look at it as an amenity, and so they discount the value if it's not connected to the main house. Even though, like in the city of LA, they'll let you have its own separate electric meter. It could have its own separate gas meter. You can rent it out, but the appraisers won't use it as a separate unit. The other thing is that if you're looking at, let's say, duplex comps, in many of the areas, the duplexes tend to be in kind of crap, you know, not crappier, but let's say slightly less desirable neighborhoods than the single families. And in those scenarios, the single family comps are higher than the duplex comps on a per square foot basis. So if an appraiser goes out and he says, okay, well, now it's 2 units, and he does treat it like 2 units, you can actually hurt your value because you based it on single family price per square foot versus, you know, your duplex price per square foot. And so there's so many things to consider. I would say that, you know, for the most part, do your homework, get the demographics of the buyer, get the demographics for what the need is in the area. I see a lot of these that get built in, like, let's say, like the North Hollywood area, and they're reselling in a price point that, you know, I had an old client of mine that did one, and I told him I wouldn't do it. He's like, oh, well, I want the extra square footage and all this stuff. And he built it, lost some money on the house. And the problem was, I said, look, somebody who's paying $2 million for a house, they don't want a rental on their own property, right? They want to be able to park their nice car in the garage. And, you know, and that's exactly what happened with him. He took up all this space to expand the garage, shrunk the backyard, It's a family area. They wanted a bigger backyard, and he took up the space because he thought, hey, I'm building all this extra square footage. And in his mind, it was like equal. And not only did the appraisers not agree with him, but also the buyers didn't agree with him. So that's really important. So if you're going to do that, and it's not an area that is your expertise, really reach out and get a consensus of like 3 area experts. You're a real estate agent. You expect people to call you. Now you're a buyer that's investing in another area. You should do the same thing and get that consensus. And what I mean by a consensus is that if you get 2 agents and they both agree and the third one disagrees and he's got reasonable reasoning as to why he disagrees, call a 4th one. And if that 4th one agrees with the 3rd one that disagreed with the first 2, then go back to the first 2 and say, hey, I'm hearing this. What do you think about that? If they change their mind, they were just trying to get a listing, right? So discount what they said and then find another one that agrees. So you're looking for a consensus of 3 to figure out exactly if you should be doing it or not. If you're going to keep this as cash flow, I think ADUs are probably the single best tool for cash flow that's out there right now. If you could build something for, or convert a garage for, let's say, $80,000 or $85,000 and have a nice ADU, and it's leasing out for $1,200 or $1,400 in certain neighborhoods, that's great. I mean, what a great way to create extra income. So that is definitely a win.
Okay, also another question from the Q&A is from Marco Cordova. He's asking if we do construction loans. We do construction loans, Marco, but I can send you an email with more details on that because that goes into another different aspect. There's so many things to go over. So I'll get your information and I'll send you more details. Or in the future, we will be having a class on our construction loans. We do construction loans for 1 to 4. So yes, we can do those, and 75% loan to cost, yes.
I see a lot of the other questions are if I would share like the repair list. You know what I would rather do is, Fausto, maybe at some point we can set up a different kind of time. And what we'll do is we'll do a virtual walkthrough. And I'll have a like 3D Matterport done of a fixer upper before we walk through. And what we'll do is we'll just all set one up together, so that because everyone has different ways of doing the remodeling. I don't want to necessarily stifle. It's not that I don't want to share it, but it's just that I don't want to stifle you with what I assume to have to be done with the remodel. I'd rather you make your own decisions and we go through and then talk about it in a live session. So maybe we can do a live session. If you're interested in that, reach out to Fausto, and and I'll have a Matterport done of one of the properties that either I'm looking to buy or that we've already bought. And so I'll spend that money. We'll do a virtual walkthrough, and then we'll all sit in front of our computers, and you'll create your own sheet together. And that way you get a feel for exactly what you need. And in that way, that if you were going to do something differently, then I kind of show you exactly what to do, and we'll show you some other kind of tricks to make it work, if that makes sense, if that sounds reasonable.
Okay, thank you for that, Robert. Yes, I will talk to DAR and see if we can get another class to go more in depth into the fix and flip. If anyone else has any more questions, this is the time to type them up in the Q&A.
I notice there's also some questions in the chat. Let's see here. I think they're kind of similar in nature. Okay, all right.
Okay, well, I appreciate everyone coming along, and thank you all for joining us today. I want to really appreciate Robert and Fausto for bringing this class together. It was very informative and very insightful. We did drop Fausto's email in the chat box, so if any of you guys need it, is fausto@inbanet.com in case you need to reach out. Fausto will be talking soon. I appreciate you both. Thank you guys both for joining us. Thank you, Robert.
You got it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.